The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative
on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And I'm Jake Novak, in with you live this evening, in for the great Roger Stone. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And it's kind of a cool time to be on the air live because we're counting down to President Trump's highly anticipated, still kind of stealthy live address to the nation. We're expecting it to be about election integrity, which could be anything from discussing the problems with ballot harvesting, the problems with mail-in ballots in general, to specific elections that he might pinpoint that have some really funky stuff that went on that were never explained. And as I peek at the mainstream news media, their disingenuous, non-journalistic previews for this speech, they're all saying that basically Trump's going to lie. Don't listen. I mean, this is what journalists are. This is what journalism is in America in 2026, telling people not to pay attention to the president talking. And they wonder why their business model is dying and so many people are getting laid off. It's going to be an interesting speech. There were some reports a few days ago that he might pinpoint the two Senate elections in Georgia, where we have Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff, two Democrats in a really red state of Georgia. I know that the elections there are closer than they've been in recent years in some cases, and they did vote for Clinton. But Georgia's a pretty deep red state, and that was proven during the 2024 elections with less chicanery going on there, and Trump won Georgia pretty clearly. So he might talk about that. He might talk about, for example, what happened in Wisconsin, where suddenly they closed the doors and we don't know what happened, and suddenly a bunch of votes get counted. Of course, that was really also more of an issue in the Atlanta, Fulton County elections offices in 2020. So there may be these kinds of discussions. And before you fall for, and I'm sure many of you listening here aren't falling for it, but before you fall for the narratives that you're going to hear that I'm seeing on these other mainstream channels, just out of the corner of my eye, saying that everything Trump says tonight is debunked. It's not debunked. It was never investigated. We don't audit our elections in this country. We should. But until we do, then you can't say this is a debunked claim. Debunked by whom? Were there investigators who looked into it and really... no. Just because you say it's debunked doesn't mean it's debunked. But as I always say, and I hope everyone who hasn't heard this before will listen to it now, and if you have heard me say it before, please remember this. And this was, of course, the biggest problem in 2020, where we had this massive number of millions and millions and millions of mail-in ballots. But I don't care if you have one mail-in ballot or 10 million or 100 million. The same thing that I'm about to say is true. Mail-in ballots are not secret ballots. Duh. They're not. And if you don't have a secret ballot in your election, it's not legitimate. Period. Fraud or no fraud. A mail-in ballot filled out by I don't know who, under whose influence I don't know, is not legitimate. And we have American history to prove it. Non-secret balloting in this country was banned, and it got a lot of traction in the years after Reconstruction, when we had competitive elections in the South again, and they put a ballot box for Republicans and a ballot box for Democrats, and very often you voted at work so your boss could see how you voted, or you voted in public, not secret ballots. And once again, here is my gift to those who want to fight for election integrity. Here it is. This is something better than you get from the professional political consultants, who are all bad at what they do and are all bad people. Full-time political consultants are bad human beings. They are a huge reason why our country is a mess right now, because they continue to have influence even after elections, and they mold policy based on small polls here and there, and they all think they're successful because, in a 50-50 society, because we do have a pretty split electorate in this country, even the worst political consultant's going to be batting 500. But here's my gift. Here's some good political advice. If I were a political consultant, here's some gold I'm going to give you. And I've given it to the country before, no charge. Again, my alter ego is Jake Novak, unemployable political consultant. Why am I unemployable? Because I give good advice. And I want the country to do well instead of some guy running for dog catcher. So here it is. You want to stop mail-in balloting in this country because it's all illegitimate? A mail-in ballot is illegitimate by its face, on its face. Fraud or no fraud. It's not a secret ballot. My God. How many hundreds of years in our society have we known, in all society, that non-secret ballots aren't legitimate? How long have we known this? Hundreds of years. I think the Australians are the first to figure this out. The first secret ballot, I think, were called the Australian ballot. But whatever. Here's what you do. You put a commercial on. You get a guy in a wife-beater T-shirt. Big, burly, disgusting guy leaning over his wife with her shaky hand filling out the mail-in ballot. And we all know what's going on there. That'll solve the problem real fast. I don't know who's forcing who to fill out what bubble in the paper. I don't know if the people know what they're doing. I don't know if they have any privacy whatsoever, and that's why mail-in ballots, among other things, are not legitimate. I don't want to see any mail-in ballots in any election ever. Not one. Well, but Jake, what about our troops overseas? They can vote on a secure laptop like people do in embassies and consulates for foreign countries all over the world. But what if they're in a battle? They're in a battle. They're not voting. You jackwagon. They're getting shot at. I don't think filling out a ballot is going to be their first priority. Do you moron? If you're on a military base overseas, you can go to the PX and vote on a secure laptop. That's it. No mail-in ballots. And I really hope that the president tonight makes that argument or something along those lines. I know he's going to, if this speech really is about election integrity, I know he's going to continue some of the messages he's made in the past, rightfully so, denigrating the validity of mail-in ballots. But I hope he goes as far as I do and remind people that no mail-in ballot is ever legitimate in any election. I don't want to see any non-secret ballots cast in any election. They're phony. They're not reliable. And I'm all for voter convenience. If you want to vote in person a week or two before the election, fine. As long as you're voting in person and in a secret booth ballot kind of situation like we have. And I think that giving people a week or 10 days before an election day, like so many states and cities do, to vote in person like that, is more than enough accommodation for people. I want to see great voter participation out there. I really do. But there's only so much we can do. If we're dragging people to vote and forcing them to vote and pushing their nose into the ballot, then that's also not really legitimate. It's kind of like coerced charity. One of the great Jewish rabbis and philosophers of all time said that about charity. If you're forcing someone to give charity, then it's not charity. It may not be a sin per se, but it's certainly not a good deed if you're forced to do it. Coerced charity is not charity, and coerced voting is not really legitimate either. I would love to, so sure, vote in person 10 days in advance if you want to. That's great. Vote on election day, even better. Mail-in ballots, never should be allowed. Even Democrats like Jimmy Carter used to know this. Well, I don't know if he died knowing this. Maybe he changed his tune, but he talked about this. Remember, for years after his presidency, he was one of those election inspectors that the UN would send to places, or the U.S. would send to places, usually Latin America. And he denigrated the whole idea of mail-in ballots. Rightfully so. But if President Trump goes into specific election stuff about how ballots showed up late somewhere and talks about ballot harvesting, which is also illegitimate, someone going into a neighborhood with a bunch of ballots and telling people, here, sign this, when we have no idea whether the person knows what they're signing, and also that isn't a secret ballot, that should not be legitimate. We should not be allowed ballot harvesting. So I'm sure he'll talk about a lot of these things, and we should give it our attention, folks. Don't listen to what the mainstream media says. There's no evidence of it. There's no evidence. There's never any investigation. These elections don't get audited. The FBI has been investigating under this new Trump term, the second term of Trump, and maybe he'll talk about some of the things that have been uncovered. I understand that a good deal of the country is not going to believe what the president says about this, that there is indeed evidence of it, but I want to hear it. And you got AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the congresswoman from New York, saying that no one should air his speech. You know, here's a little bit of a cheat sheet. And there's a lot of people who say things publicly. I'm going to play some of those guys later in this program. There's a lot of guys and gals who say things publicly I really wish didn't say anything. I really don't like them. But one of those cheat sheets in life is if you have somebody who says someone shouldn't be given the mic, someone should never be allowed to speak, pretty good. It's pretty good, indicator that the person telling the other people they can't speak is the bad guy. You're the bad guy if you say you should turn off the mic. I got into an argument today online with a big name journalist who I don't think is a very good guy. I don't think he should be censored. Kind of hate what he said, but I don't think he should be censored. Geez, if I need my opponents to be censored, then I'm really not much of a pundit or someone who, more important, I really don't like that term pundit. Just I like to be an essayist and someone who really wants to focus on good policy for America. And good policy for America, one of my favorite good policies would be more election integrity. We have almost none right now. People do not trust the election process. It has been dirtied up by this whole mail-in ballot explosion, by ballot harvesting, which is a form of mail-in ballots. And it's very disturbing. It's very disturbing. And to call anyone who has a problem with these kinds of elections, a problem where someone is leading by an X amount of votes at 3 a.m. and then the lights go off in the Board of Elections and suddenly there's a bunch of ballots that go the other way, to call that person an election denier for questioning that is, basically that's gaslighting. And gaslighting is a really overused term. The two most overused terms in America today are gaslighting and narcissist. Usually when people say narcissist, they mean that person's being selfish at that particular moment. Just because you're selfish at one particular moment doesn't mean you're a full-on narcissist. Full-on narcissism is a pretty serious disorder. There are thankfully very few of those in the world right now. There's some selfish people, but that's different. And gaslighting is also overused. But when you tell people who are getting very upset about weird stuff happening in elections in the late night hours after the lights go out and suddenly a bunch of trucks pull up with some ballots, you don't know where the hell they came from. It's not being hysterical. We all have a right to ask those questions. Don't gaslight us into saying, well, there's no evidence. What do you mean there's no evidence? It's never the way things went in all the years of our elections in this country. It doesn't happen in a lot of other countries that have a lot of other problems, like France and Great Britain. They got a lot of problems in those countries, okay? But their elections seem to have a lot more integrity. So these are legitimate questions, and I hope the president addresses each and every one of them. When I come back, let's talk about the president, his number two, at least on the constitutional roster, Vice President Vance. I have some advice for him. Again, I will continue to take on my alter ego of Jake Novak, unemployable political consultant, because I actually have some good advice for the vice president. Stay tuned for that.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And I'm Jake Novak filling in for Roger Stone, and with me is my alter ego, Jake Novak, unemployable political consultant. Why am I unemployable? Because I give good advice. And the political consulting firms don't want people who give good advice. They like giving bad advice, and they thrive on that. But I'm going to give some good advice now to our Vice President, JD Vance, who is doing everything all wrong. If he truly wants to run for president in 2028, if he truly wants to have actually a strong political career, no matter what happens after this vice presidency, he needs to change a lot of what he's doing. And before I get into the Israel aspect of it, the alleged anti-Semitism, let's just talk about the optics here. Let's just pretend he was talking about hamburgers and not Israel, or widgets, or whatever you want to talk about. First of all, he's appearing weak. He's going on Joe Rogan like he did earlier this week and complaining that there's a campaign against him. That's weak. That's weak. You got to come off strong. Even if you are being persecuted, even if there is some unfairness, you come off strong, not like a whiny little boy, which he did. Never do that. I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. The Democrats like strength in their candidates. They don't nominate good, strong candidates, but they don't have really many choices. But they would like to see more strength. They love the nastiness. 99% of Gavin Newsom's appeal, which is not as strong as it was a couple of years ago, let's face it, he's having a hard time. But 99% of his appeals is a nasty SOB on social media, which I don't think is really that great, but just goes to show being stronger rather than a whiner can work for you. So here he is on Joe Rogan saying, well, the deal with Iran didn't work out, and he's blaming Israel for it, which is just, again, imagine he's saying the word hamburgers. Take the Israel part out of the equation. This is a whiny boy as our vice president, and it's not good optics or audio. Listen.
And again, with limitations. Like when the Iranians hit ships, the president has been willing to knock the hell out of the Iranians in response. This is not just a negotiation. It's negotiation, it's military, it's all these things. But I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there have been people within the Israeli government who are trying to actually shift us away from that policy because they want to continue the military campaign.
They want to continue. And I had this whole deal. I did my homework. I wrote a memorandum of understanding and everyone signed it. And the Israelis didn't want to do it. Yeah, they didn't want to do it because Iran is an evil regime, not to be trusted. I don't care what paper they signed. Any person could have told you that. And I did. And I tried to get everyone to understand, don't be such a whiny little person. And I said this to all the pro-Israel friends too. Don't be whiny about what's in this memorandum of understanding because it doesn't matter. It could be us promising Iran unicorns and rainbows. They would still break it. The only question we needed to ask then, as we do now, is what is President Trump going to do when they do break it? Because they will break it. And that didn't take long, did it? This is a whiny vice president. That's not good. Usually the vice president's role traditionally has been to be even nastier than the president. Take the bully pulpit. Do what the president wants. Talk about what the president wants in a really, really even tougher, sharper way. That's how you do it. That's how you you are to be a strong vice president and a potential presidential successor at some point. Again, you think this is about Israel here? It's not. This is about optics. This is about how you sound. And this is someone complaining on the biggest podcast there is that the Israelis wanted to continue with. Israelis don't want war. They just know that signing a little piece of paper isn't going to matter and more people will die. But again, take the Israel part of the equation out of it if you can. Most people can't. They're too crazed one way or the other over Israel, and I understand that. But see if you can. I have a little bit more to say to JD Vance in a second. This is free, real advice from someone who can't be employed by political consultancy firms because I give good advice. Stay with us here on The Stone Zone.
The Stone Zone. Entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
It's 8:34 a.m. East PM. My goodness, I do a lot of morning stuff, so that's why 8:34 p.m. here Eastern Time Zone. I'm Jake Novak filling in for Roger Stone this evening. And a big reason why our country has so many political problems and cultural problems is because of political consultants. They're really bad at what they do, and for the most part, they're bad people. I'm talking about the people in D.C. who work at those big firms. They give bad advice. And whoever is advising JD Vance right now really should give back whatever money he's getting or she's getting because they're doing a terrible job for the man. They really are. Now, ultimately, it's JD Vance's responsibility. I'm not trying to remove him from responsibility here for the things he says and does. He's an adult, and he's the Vice President of the United States. But honestly, he's getting bad advice from people who either don't know their history or just don't know politics well enough to work in this country. So in addition to, as I said before the break and played the soundbite of him complaining about Israelis working against him and they wanted a war to continue and it just didn't work for me, just coming off weak and whiny, which is never good. It's never good in politics. Even phony bravado is better than real whining, even if you think you've got a reason to. I learned that my senior year of high school. It was early in the 1988 presidential primary process. And George H.W. Bush was getting a real challenge from Bob Dole. This is early 1988. And George Bush does a live interview with Dan Rather on CBS News, and he jumps down his throat. And a lot of people were surprised because George H.W. Bush was like Mr. Nice Guy and kind of soft-spoken, and people were saying he was kind of wimpy. And he just jumped down his throat. And it was probably all a setup by his campaign people back when there were better political advisors out there. But it worked. Gosh darn it if it didn't work. It made him seem strong. And it took a lot of the momentum out of the Dole campaign. And he pretty much cakewalked to the nomination, give or take a couple of stumbles here and there in 1988. Now, another thing that doesn't get you good traction, in addition to being a whiner, is being a conspiracy theorist as in the political realm. You can do that on podcasts and make a lot of money and do well. You can even do it in mainstream media now or on the media. You can do that. But as a candidate, you can't do that. And this time it is something specific. I want to get into the realm of anti-Semitism or Israel bashing, that kind of thing. Again, being whiny and complaining was the problem about the first thing I told you about. It wasn't really about being critical of Israel. If you can forget the Israel factor in that first part, please do. I know it's hard. I know it's really hard, but try. In this case, though, don't forget it, because anti-Semitism and Israel bashing has never really had great success in this country. Yes, it gets you it's like a drug. It gets you an initial boost, even sometimes a feeling of invulnerability. It's like cocaine, but then the half-life is really short, and you end up having a really low ceiling to how far you can go. I know it feels like to a lot of people that anti-Semitism is exploding right now and everyone's really doing great with it, but it's a great way to basically put a very low ceiling on your political career. Now, there is only one variable to that. The variable being that this country has, by legal and illegal means, imported a lot of anti-Semitic hate into this country in the last 10, 15 years. A lot of those people coming through the open borders of the Biden administration were Jew haters in a non-American, un-American kind of way. So they do add a little bit of a variable. But here's the thing. JD Vance is a Republican. The kind of people who we've imported into this country from people who hate America, places that hate America, people who hate America who are for some reason coming here anyway, they're not going to vote for a Republican. They're not going to vote for JD Vance no matter how anti-Semitic or anti-Israel he may come off being. So in this next soundbite I'm going to play from this Joe Rogan interview that the vice president gave, he does the double whammy. He does the conspiracy theory and the anti-Semitism. Listen to this.
He clearly had connections to the highest levels of American intelligence. He clearly had connections to the highest levels of Israeli intelligence.
Well, most people think he was Mossad.
Yeah, Mossad or CIA or some other deep state, whether in America or Israel or another country. Or
he's talking about Jeffrey Epstein. So he's doing the Epstein thing with Joe Rogan, and he said he clearly there's absolutely no evidence of that. There's no evidence of that. Also, it just defies all logic. Look at all the Jewish pro-Israel people who have been ensnared in this Epstein scandal. Originally people like Alan Dershowitz, who's had to fight back against a lot of libel and slander allegations. I don't think he was involved in anything really disgusting with Jeffrey Epstein, but he was working with him. Why would Mossad want to smear him? Why would Mossad want to smear Larry Summers? There's a few other Jewish people who have been very badly tainted by Jeffrey Epstein. Pro-Israel people. It makes no sense that he would be with Mossad. It makes no sense that he would be with an intelligence committee. Would an intelligence community be interested in some of the dealings he was having and some of the compromising positions he had some of these people get into? Sure. But he wasn't working for them. There's no evidence of that. And, we've got all these files, and there's no evidence of that. But he's playing this conspiracy theory. I'm telling you right now, it works in podcasts. It's going to work for Joe Rogan real well. It's going to work for Tucker Carlson real well. It's going to work for a lot of people in those kinds of professions really well. But it's not going to work well in an American campaign. Ask Father Coughlin. I don't know how many of the listeners right now know who Father Coughlin was, but he was a Catholic priest who was hugely popular on the radio for many years, virulent anti-Semite, until the archdiocese told him to cut it out. Took a long time for that to happen. But he had a very low ceiling to how far he was going to go. He was going to be a radio personality stoking up old school anti-Semitism. He was never going to be anything other than that. And JD Vance does the double whammy here, the conspiracy theory thing, which also doesn't work. It makes it seem, the thing about conspiracy theories that I don't like is they promote powerlessness, the idea of powerlessness. That there's all these guys behind the scenes doing X, Y, and Z, and we can't do anything about it. Well, in that case, why bother running? Why don't you just go live in a bunker somewhere? I got to have some hope when somebody's running, whether you're right wing or left wing. I got to have someone running who's saying, there's something wrong out there and I'm going to fix it. Not, I don't know who's doing this. They're unbeatable. They can't be defeated. There's a conspiracy theory out there. I mean, it's so defeatist. It also doesn't give me any specific idea of what you're going to do to fix it. Man, Vice President Vance, you are getting some really, really bad advice. Ultimately, you're responsible for it, but you got to find out. You got to do something about who's giving you this bad advice. The only little variable you got going for you is that the whole anti-Semitism thing, which puts a very low ceiling on your future, might be a little bit more lucrative now in some ways because, again, we've imported tens of millions of Jew haters into this country, and women haters, and America haters, and freedom haters. But ultimately, they're not voting Republican, ever. And ultimately, that's another issue. They're anti-Americans, so I really don't know. Are you going for them? You're going for the non-patriotic group? It makes no sense. It's a stupid political strategy. If you can somehow, and most of us can't do it, and I understand why you can't do it, but just imagine for a second that we're not talking about Jewish people, we're not talking about anti-Semitism, we're not talking about Israel. Just try to get out of that. I know there's a lot of people online who talk about me and another guy here at our parent network here, WABC, Sid Rosenberg, are always talking about these the Jews in Israel. Well, actually, you're always talking about them. It's your obsession. But here's your chance. I'm going to remove those things. Would you vote for someone who's whining about somebody working against them? That's not a strong persona to project yourself as a candidate. Would you vote for someone who's promoting conspiracy theories with no evidence, even if you believe them? Remember, the point of talking about conspiracy theories all the time is just to remind everyone how powerless we are, how we don't know really. We can't get to the folks who are doing X, Y, and Z. That's not what we go to the polls to vote for. It might be completely irrational, but we vote for in the hope that the guy or gal we're voting for is going to fix this thing. Not going to complain about it. Not going to tell us, well, there's an unseen hand of power here. I can't get... No, that doesn't do anything. That's great for a podcast. It's great for a session in the common room at the dorm where everyone's a little drunk or stoned and you're talking about your stupid theories. But it's death politically. It's death politically. And if you do that kind of stuff, you project yourself as weak and as a loser. And there's one more thing I'll say about the whole JD Vance thing that I have said for years, and I think is absolutely, undeniably, objectively true. If you remember nothing else, remember this. You don't want to be the front runner for president anywhere before 8 or 7 months before general election day. Being a front runner for president a year out, 2 years out, 2 years and change out is death. It puts a huge target on you. It puts all the focus on you. And it almost always ends up in you not winning. There are some exceptions. I mean, Donald Trump being the front runner for the Republican nomination in 2024 doesn't really count. The guy was the incumbent president, basically. I mean, he wasn't in office. And you know what I mean. He had already had a term. He was already in the public eye in that way. He already had the bullseye around him. He breaks up a lot of the norms and the axioms of politics. But you don't want to be a front runner too early in this game, folks. It's death. Ask Howard Dean. Ask Paul Tsongas. You probably don't even remember who the heck that is. Ask Hillary Clinton. She was a front runner way too early in the process. And you don't want that. So if JD Vance was doing this thing to push the memorandum of understanding and to go on Joe Rogan now and do all these kinds of things in the hopes of getting into the inside lane for president in 2028, even if he just did everything right, even if he took all the right, used all the right persona, used all the right messages, which he didn't, it would still not be so smart. Now, you're still the vice president. You can't go run and hide under a tree. But if you do have to say something, do big picture stuff. And honestly, I know a lot of people talk about Marco Rubio. We don't even know if he's running for president. But if he is, this is the kind of thing that you would want to do 2 years and change before general election day. Talking about big picture stuff, large policy stuff, and sounding like a statesman. Here he is today.
The most essential duty of the state, the first responsibility, frankly, of any government of any kind, is the protection of its people. It's the protection of its country. This is a sacred obligation that should transcend all political and all ideological divisions. It is why, for example, we have militaries. It's why we have intelligence agencies. It's why counterterrorism bureaus exist, why police forces exist. Keeping our people safe is the reason why every country represented here has all of these things.
So, again, large scale, the first job of our political structure is to keep people safe. Yeah, that's Thomas Hobbes stuff. That's some of the great political philosophy. I don't know if he's running. I really don't. I think a lot of people are assuming he's running. If gun to my head, I'd say, yeah, sure. But that's the kind of speech you want to make. You don't want to be going on podcasts whining about stuff and promoting conspiracy theories. All right, we come back. Speaking of people who make wrong moves, Luigi Mangione, I know he's real popular among the crazed leftist groups, but you know he's a failure too, and I'm going to explain why when we come back here on the Stone Zone.
The Stone Zone, entertaining and informative.
On the Red Apple Podcast Network.
And I'm Jake Novak in for Roger Stone, live here, 8:52 p.m. I got my AM and PM mixed up before. Sign that I'm working very hard, but I know it is PM, 8:50. It's dark outside. And I'm Jake Novak, very happy to fill in for Roger Stone. He often gives me this chance, and I appreciate it. I want to talk about some losers, because I've already been talking about the loser message that our vice president put out there all by himself, voluntarily. Didn't have to do it. Someone gave him some bad advice. Of course, ultimately, it's his responsibility. I'm talking about that, but he's not alone. We have some other losers very much in the public eye in America who promote loser messages or say one thing and do other things to undermine what they supposedly are for. One of them is Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. Only a few more months left in his term, by the way. And here he is bemoaning the fact that Elon Musk is a trillionaire. His enemy, Elon Musk. Listen.
Well, look, 10% of people own two-thirds of the wealth in this nation. That same 10% own 93% of the stock market. 30-year-old today is doing worse than his or her parents for the first time in U.S. history. If that's not a five-alarm fire, I don't know what the hell is. We were sitting there, some of us at least, celebrating the best of Roman Republic, Greek democracy on July 4th. The vision of our founding fathers, co-equal branches of government, co-equal branches of government, popular sovereignty, rule of law. I'm reminded, thinking about the Greeks, there was a guy around 50 AD, 2,000 years ago, warning the Athenians, Plutarch. He said, the imbalance between the rich and the poor is the oldest and most fatal ailment of all republics. Think about that, 2,000 years ago.
Yeah, Gavin, a couple of things. Again, he kicked this complaint about the growth of wealth in a small number of people. That's always going to be the case. There's always going to be people who achieve, and in some cases, some of them will get some luck, but luck is very much overrated. There's a professor at Cornell named Professor Robert Frank, whose entire career is based on how everything is luck. If I were a student in this class, I would say, well, then why are you giving out grades? I demand an A, or just roll the dice. I mean, this whole class is a farce. Why would you have a class where you have to work and study and perform on a test if all you're learning is that it's just luck? But anyway, he's bemoaning the fact about Elon Musk. Actually, if you know your statistics, we are creating more millionaires and billionaires in this country every day than we ever have. The problem with 30-year-olds not being in such a great state has a lot more to do with mental health than economics. Most 30-year-olds I meet today are like the 20-year-olds of 40 years ago, or 18-year-olds. But the thing about Gavin Newsom is he's a loser, because he also just signed a bill on the same day that he's giving this little speech 2 days ago. He signed a bill to create special rebates in California only. Remember, we got rid of the rebates for EV buyers nationally in September of last year. But in California now, if you're a first-time EV buyer, you get a $3,500 rebate. You know who sells the two most popular EVs in this country? Elon Musk. So the guy getting up there complaining about how Elon Musk is too rich just signed a bill to make him richer. Will it make him a lot richer? Is Tesla going to get the bulk of this benefit? That doesn't matter. It's more money to Tesla, I promise you. And Tesla's the biggest reason why Elon Musk is a trillionaire. Tesla stock, okay? And what a dope. Another dope is Luigi Mangione. And I know they've tried to make him into this great hero. And we can talk specifically, and we should mostly talk about how the killing of an innocent, unarmed person on the street is never right. If you believe you have a criminal, then, you don't just kill them unless they're in the act of killing someone. And his murder of Brian Thompson on the sidewalks of New York at the end of 2024 is not excusable under any means, and I hate the medical insurance companies. I really don't like them. I don't like the business model. It makes no sense to me other than for them. It's awful. But here's the thing. Luigi Mangione wasn't trying to hurt the earnings balance sheet of United Healthcare on a quarterly basis. But he was trying to bring down the company. He was trying to bring down the industry. And you know what? For 8 months after the killing of Brian Thompson, Luigi Mangione murdering him, and yes, I believe he murdered him. I know he hasn't been convicted yet. This is a guy who actually had the names of his victims on the shell casings. I'm going to say he's guilty of this crime. And I know a court of law hasn't convicted him yet, but again, I'm going to say this is my opinion, and I think it's a very well backed up opinion. So the 8 months after the killing, United Healthcare shares did have a problem. They were going down pretty fast. But you know, ever since they reached that bottoming out period in August of 2025, they've been on a tear. And just today, United Healthcare announced very strong earnings for the last quarter. They have gained well over half of the losses that they incurred over that 8-month period. It's up 40. United Healthcare shares are up 45% from where they were a year ago today. You failed. And as I said at the time of the killing, if Luigi Mangione really wanted to do something to help people, killing wasn't the right way. Apparently he was a brilliant guy, and there is very often a thin line between brilliance and insanity. Then make an app where people can learn healthcare tips, Luigi. Do what you got to do. But don't shoot someone. And by the way, you failed. This has been The Stone Zone. I'm Jake Novak in for Roger Stone tonight. Have a great rest of your evening.
Thanks for listening to The Stone Zone with Roger Stone. You can hear The Stone Zone with Roger Stone weeknights at 8 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?